Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peak. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peak.
So Shalom Aleichem. Hopefully in the brief interlude between programs I got all the hoof out of me. So that I won't tackle any more Art Scroll commentary in a bad way. Okay, yeah. And that God will forgive me for any Lashon Hara that I spoke. Because it just bothers me a little bit. But let's come back to our study in Pirkei Avot. And we're still using Rabbi Basar's commentary based on a selection that he made from the Maharal, Rabbi Judah of Prague, okay, in his commentary on Pirkei Avot called Der Chaim. And we're in chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the fathers in the Mishnah. And we are in Mishnah number 17, a very, very beautiful Mishnah, the very first one, given by one of my personal favorite rabbis of all time, Rabbi Akiva, who says that jest and levity can accustom a person to immorality. And we've been through all of this, and we're not going to go over it again. And now he wants to talk about the Masoret, that it is a protective fence for the Torah, okay? And then he says, and tithes are a protective fence for wealth, and vows are a protective fence for abstinence, and a protective fence for wisdom is silence. Now, let's begin. We're on page 182 if you're using the book. The Masoret refers to the traditional tally of how many words in the written Torah are written fully vocalized or spelled full, how many are written deficient, that are missing letters, okay? And it also includes mnemonic systems, meaning, well, I'll show you some in a minute, to remember details of the oral Torah, such as who said what opinion, and the order in which various subjects are developed, all right? So let's think for a moment. And imagine in your mind a page of a Sefer Torah, a page that is used by the scribes to copy, okay? To copy a Sefer Torah for a congregation. In the scribe's copy, or his master copy that he is using, so we'll have two columns of text, okay, big text of the Torah itself, and then in the margins, all the way around like a fence, is the Masoret. The Masoret will include in those margins, on this page of the Torah, in this column of the Torah, there are 32 alephes. There are 55 baits, 16 gimels. Goes through every letter that's on the page and tells you exactly how many is in that column. All right? Now what's interesting, if you ever see a scribe, a sofer, and by the way, sofer, lispor in Hebrew means to count. A sofer is a scribe. The word that's used for the name of a scribe literally means a counter. Why? Because he counts the letters. And the letters in the column of the Torah that he just wrote, they will have to match the count of the letters in the Masoret. This is how the Masoret is a protective fence for the Torah. You can't, it's a safeguard against copyist mistakes, okay, because it all has to match. And if you ever see a scribe do it, they have a frame, like a big cigar box, that they put down. They take it's a metal, because they're dealing with parchment. It's like a metal, I don't know the word for it, scribe, I guess, a little tool, you know, that's sharp on the end. And they go from corner to corner, okay, where they make a frame. They just scratch it into the parchment, and they make their lines. Then what they do is they begin by writing the center letter, because the Masoret will tell them what letter is in the center of this column. They write the center letter, and then they'll move and write the top upper right letter, then upper left, then lower right, lower left, and then everything has to fit within those letters. Very, very beautiful, very interesting. And the concentration that they have to use is absolutely unbelievable. And especially writing the four-letter name of Hashem. And anyway, it's really to be a sofer, to be a scribe, takes an unbelievable amount of discipline, an unbelievable closeness to Hashem. Really and truly, this is why all scribes are really, really holy people. And this is also why they know the text of the Bible so well, because they have written it in this way, in this very personal, intimate way, over and over and over again. Also included in the Masoret, he says, are different other information. One of the commentaries that will tell you many things that are written in the Masoret, even though we want to see in our Sefer Torahs, our book Torahs, not Sefer Torah, not a scroll, but a printed book Torah, there will be some information from time to time that's given, like here, out here to the side, those little letters out there. They come from the Masoret. They come from the big Masoret. And the Baal HaTurim, this is his commentary. He also wrote a big commentary called the Tur, which are lines, okay? He was the Tur, and Tur means lines, all right? Because why? Because he was a scribe, and he did the lines of the Torah, okay? But he wrote, his main course was a commentary called the Tur, Rabbi Yaakov, and his condiments to the main course was a set of books called Baal HaTurim, the Master of the Lines, all right? And it's unbelievable stuff that he just picks out, mainly from the Masoret. So for instance, I just picked this one up before I walked out of the house at home to come here. And this is the book of Genesis, Bereshit. So for instance, in Bereshit, where are we at here? Chapter 2, in verse 4, it says, "These are the products of the heavens and the earth, the generations of the heavens and the earth, when they were created." So there is a Masoretic note on that verse that says Beit, just the letter Beit. And the Baal HaTurim comes and says, this Masoretic note, Beit, means that these words, or this word, appears twice in the Tanakh. These two words, Eretz v'Shamayim, earth and heaven. Okay? Here, and also in Psalm 148, verse 13, where it says, Hodo al Eretz v'Shamayim, His glory is upon earth and heaven. Said that way, earth first and then heaven, okay? In fact, I didn't read far enough. These are the products of the heavens and the earth when they were created. On the day that Hashem God made earth and heavens, is the way the verse reads. So on earth and heavens, there's a little bait in the Masorah that tells us that that particular phrase, Eretz v'Shamayim, because usually it's Shamayim v'Eretz, okay? Heavens and earth, not the other way around. So that particular phrase appears twice in the entire Tanakh. That's what's told to us in the Masorah. And the Baal HaTurim is telling us that here. This Masoretic note means it appears twice in the Tanakh, here in Genesis, okay? And then again in Psalm 148:13, where it says, His glory is upon earth and heaven. Now he gives us an explanation of why is that. One verse explains the other. And most of the time when we have two mentions, a bait, in the Masorah saying this particular word or phrase is mentioned twice, one is going to explain the other. In this case it says, why is His glory upon earth and heaven? His glory is upon earth and heaven because He made earth and heaven. One of them connects to the other one, okay, is the idea. Now it just goes on and on and on because now he goes to, listen to the next one. There's another bait on where it says, on down it says, and a mist, okay? A mist ascended from the earth and watered the whole surface of the soil. This word ve'ed, which is translated as a mist, there is a Masoretic note on it, okay? In fact, the full note reads like this, okay? Two, okay? This word appears twice in the Tanakh. And with two meanings. One of those meanings is destruction. The other one is mist. One of those words is spelled in full, okay, meaning it has all the letters. And this one in Genesis is spelled defective, meaning it's missing a letter. Now that's the full Masoretic note. You would not have any clue what that is unless you understand the shorthand of the rabbis, okay? Because they don't write these things out in full, they write them in shorthand. It's all in abbreviations, which is why you have to be a scribe, a sofer, to even understand it, to even understand what's in the Masorah, okay? But that Masorah is a fence to protect the Torah. Okay, I want to read the rest of this to you because it's very interesting what the Baal HaTurim says about this. I know we've departed a little bit from Pirkei Avot, but we will eventually make our way back. And it might give me some time to cool off over Art Scroll. Okay. The Baal HaTurim says this Masoretic note, bait, means that this word appears twice in the Tanakh. Here in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 6. Okay, and also in Job, the book of Job, chapter 18 and verse 12, where it says, ve'ed, the word is aid, ve'ed nachon letzalo, that destruction awaits at his side. You remember the Masoretic note said one place it means destruction, the other place it means a mist. So this is an allusion, the Baal HaTurim says, to that which the sages have stated in the Talmud. In the Talmud, actually in the Yerushalmi Talmud, you know, we have two of them, the Bavli, the Babylonian, and the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem. In the Yerushalmi Talmud, in Ta'anit 2:1, where the sages ask, why does the Torah refer to rain, this mist, okay, with the term aid, this moisture that's in the air, with this term? And they answer, because the created beings break the stubbornness of their hearts and pray that the Holy One, blessed is He, grant them rain. Do you understand what they're saying? The reason is that, in other words, they need moisture, okay, to survive. The absence of it can lead to their destruction. So what is destroyed is the stubbornness of their hearts. So it's a whole play on words here that's actually teaching us an entirely different lesson on an entirely different level, which is found in the Masorah. And I'm telling you, we haven't even begun. We looked at two little places here. Yeah. And this is exactly why, by the way, that's exactly why one of them is spelled full and one of them is spelled defective. And it's interesting. Says the word aid without a yud. The yud is missing, okay? It appears twice in the Tanakh, here and in Job 36:27. And both times it means a mist or rain. But the word aid, aleph, yud, dalet, with the yud, appears 20 times, exactly 20 times, 10 more times than the deficient one, and every time it means destruction. Interesting. Okay, that kind of stuff is in the Masorah. Okay. Now, I do agree, mainly, very much with the rabbi's next statement in the book. We're back on page 183 at the top of the page, where it says the Masorah protects the Torah from being forgotten, and its system of mnemonics, memory devices, many things are memory devices, okay, keeps the large amount of complex information at a person's fingertips. Now, I agree very much with what he says next. Some commentaries explain, and I used to not be so sophisticated that I understood this, but I just get better every day. Baruch Hashem. Some, that was a joke. Okay. Yeah, some commentaries explain the term Masoret to refer to the oral Torah, the oral law, because without it, some commentaries explain the term Masoret to refer to the oral Torah, because without it, the meaning of the written Torah would be lost. In other words, it's protecting the written Torah. But this explanation, he says, doesn't appear completely correct. He says correct at all. I'll be much nicer and say it's not completely so. Because the oral Torah is already an essential part of the Torah. It's not just a protection to it. It is part of the Torah. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? So to me, the Masoret protects both the written Torah and the oral Torah. Okay. We have to understand the Masoret is basically this kind of information that the scribes need, okay? But there's so much teaching that's also packed into all of that protective fence. Okay. Oh, tithes. Something that people really don't like to talk about anymore. Tithes, he says, are a protective fence for wealth. Now, we have to understand one thing. When Rabbi Akiva said tithes, you know, he lived in the destruction and the generation of the destruction of the Second Temple. When the Holy Temple is standing, you know, if we give 10%, we think we've really tithed. But if the Holy Temple is standing, the Jewish people are under the obligation to, number one, Trumah. Trumah is like a first fruit thing given to the Kohanim, which is like 2 to 3%. Okay? Then to the Levites, there's the first tithe, Maser Rishon. The first 10% goes to the Levites. And the Levites make a tithe on that. They take 10% of that and give it to the Kohanim, the priesthood. And then we have Maser Sheni, the second tithe. In some years that's given to the poor, okay, directly paid out to charities that take care of the poor or to poor people. And other years, it revolves on a 7-year, you know, a Shemitah cycle, the 7-year cycle. On other years, it goes to that you should put your second 20% away to go and spend in Jerusalem when you get the first chance you get. So, you know, if people give 10% today, that's really a big deal. But we're already talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 to 25% when the Holy Temple is standing, for Jews. I don't say that all the world is obligated to that, but you can take on yourself what you want.
Does that include charity?
No, that does not include charity. That is not charity, no.
And then there is charity.
Yes, and then there is charity, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you know, we have a problem today. The problem today is, and I see it constantly, the younger generation, either they haven't been taught anything about this concept, or if they have been taught about it, they choose to totally ignore it. The only real people who are doing any kind of practice of tithing are, you know, people jump through a hoop, by the way, also, and try to get out of the whole concept. They come up with things like, oh, well, tithing is only for the Holy Temple when the Holy Temple is standing. Or tithing is only for when it has to do with your agriculture, in other words, because everything that we have about tithes is always talked about in terms of agriculture. Do they think all Jews were farmers? I mean, do they think do they think Hashem only expects us to give him, out of every 10 apples, to give him 1 apple? No, but a lot of people use these different excuses today, you know, to not feel obligated in any way. I don't think that's the case. I can't say that we're obligated, and I certainly can't say that non-Jews are actually obligated, but, you know, if you do something a couple of times, 2 or 3 times with the intention of following the commandment, then you obligate yourself. Unfortunately, the new generation hasn't been taught, or if they have, they don't like to listen. And they're not practicing this in any shape, form, or fashion. God forbid, when all the old people pass away. Many Torah works and other institutes and things like us. I'm telling you, even our own biblical faith will no longer be around. I promise you. And I always hate every time I hear, that's like someone in this class, John Polk, who passed away. That was an unbelievable, not just a personal loss to us all who loved him and very much, but he supported so many Torah works. And it's like, okay, just turn that faucet off, okay? And that's happened tremendously to us over the past 3 or 4 years. And it's a concern, to tell you the truth. I mean, but we just have to rely upon Hashem.
We need more of you.
I agree with you very much, very much. Okay, so let's read this commentary and see what says what's being said here. I'm sure it will be good. God commanded, he says, this is still on page 183. God commanded that we give 1/10 of our wealth to him, which, by the way, it all comes from him and to begin with. It's not like we're giving him something that doesn't already belong to him. But anyway, and when we give of our money to Hashem, then a blessing flows from God to our wealth. Now that's what Rabbi Akiva is trying to say. Do you want to protect your income? Do you want to protect what you have? Then do this simple thing. And it's not so difficult. Because the number 10, he says, is symbolic of holiness, which you remember the Maharal went into a big discussion on that. Then that is an appropriate quantity to dedicate to him and a suitable vehicle through which he sustains our wealth. And by the way, that, it's very interesting. I personally think Masrot is what Rabbi Akiva says. Tithes, okay? I think he's referring to the first 10% and the second 10% because he's speaking to Jews. Okay, Siyag la'osher. It's interesting, and there's a huge play on words here that this is fixing to talk about. It says, it's an appropriate quantity to dedicate him and a suitable vehicle through which he sustains our wealth. He sustains what we have. This fact, he says, is intrinsically captured in the common root. Both of these words in Hebrew have the exact same root. Eser for 1/10, okay, or for 10. And Osher, we just changed the seen to a sheen, which means wealth, all right? So that's, in Hebrew, that absolutely means something. And if we read this in Hebrew, we can see how actually Rabbi Akiva is connecting these two concepts because they have the exact same root in Hebrew. 1/10 and wealth, the same root. So they go together, they're totally connected. Consequently, he says, only maser, that's a tithe, okay, something from the 10th, is a fence for wealth, and only the tithe and not other forms of charity is what the Maharal is saying. He's not telling you not to give other forms of charity, but other forms of charity, where you're helping others, is not the fence for the wealth, the straight 10%. So who should you give the straight 10% to? I have an opinion. You can give it to, any Torah organization, anything that is doing things. But personally, I think you should probably give it where you eat.
Amen. Amen.
That's always just good advice. And if you go and sit in somebody else's restaurant, then you should give it to them.
Right.
I'm using this as a term for spiritual food from the Torah. That's the one that's really feeding you, the one that's really helping you.
The one that is teaching you.
Yeah, the one that is teaching Torah. This is where it should go. Now, that's not saying you shouldn't also do tzedakah and give to charity and help other organizations and all of those things. Anyway, all right, let's get off. Money is always a very difficult subject, even more difficult than sex that we had before. Money can actually just really mess you up. Oy vey. Oy vey.
I have to cut some of that out.
No, absolutely not, Jason. Leave it in. I'll probably get a reprimand from my rabbi if he happens to see it. But I don't think he really watches me, so we don't have to worry about it. Don't worry about it. We should be more.
Well, this is how we understand.
So Hashem is telling me to stop and go somewhere else. Let's look at the last couple, okay? Vows are a protective fence for abstinence. And he says this refers to a vow to perform good deeds, a vow to keep the mitzvot, okay? That you promise and make a vow with Hashem that you're going to. Good deeds are an acquisition. Unlike bad deeds, he says. Look at the logic of the Maharal. It's unbelievable. Because bad deeds, in other words, because we're so totally connected to the Yetzer Hara, our body is, so bad deeds are natural to a person. But good deeds are an acquisition. For the inclination, then he quotes from Genesis chapter 8:21. For the inclination of man's heart is evil from his youth, which is a reference to the connection between the body and the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. It's very interesting. Now, a protective fence for wisdom is silence. And he says, as we explained, wisdom is actually not an intrinsic part of us. No, in Kabbalah, it's always called the flash of insight which comes to us, okay? But it is acquired and it can be lost. Silence helps us to acquire wisdom, and it helps us to keep it. As we explained in the commentary to Pirkei Avot chapter 1 and Mishnah 17, the faculty of speech is somewhat physical, which is the opposite of intellectual, he says, of that higher part of the spirit. And since opposites, he says, cannot exist at the same time, in the same space at the same time, okay? One must suspend your brain in order to talk. And this is why you say what? Engage your brain before you engage your mouth. Think before you speak, okay? That's what he's saying, because what the Maharal is saying is actually once you begin to speak, the brain stops in a sense. Yes?
But what about, I will not be silent, or do not be silent?
So what's that in reference to?
Speaking of in the presence of Hashem. You know what I'm saying?
It's actually, I think what you're talking about is a reference to that you will not be silent when it comes to the final redemption. You will remind him constantly that we need it, and that which has to do with a whole lot of things. It doesn't mean in a conversation or even in a Torah study or anything like that that gives you permission to just open your mouth and fly. You have to go and look at the context of what that is saying. We need to really look at it, but from the back of my brain, I'm thinking the context is in speaking to Hashem about the Geulah, the redemption, the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, the redemption of the Jewish people. I think you need to look at the context.
So we can't speak Torah to other people?
Yeah, of course you can speak Torah to other people. That's not what it's saying. This is talking about, when the Maharal is making the point, is if your mouth is continually engaged, your brain is not working. Okay? You're not engaging your upper faculties, which is why he's saying silence strengthens the intellect by enabling it to act effectively. He's basically only saying, only open your mouth when you're very sure of what you have to say, when you've thought about it already. This is extremely good advice. This is how to this is a protective fence for what he says, for wisdom, for something that Hashem shows to you. Okay? And look, everything we have to judge, we have to be very alert. Tony, let's put it that way. We have to be very alert and very aware of who's around us, and of what would be appropriate to say and not appropriate to say. And sometimes we just have to think those things through. That's what Rabbi Akiva is trying to tell us, I think, is be aware more than anything, you know.
Okay.
Instead of, the kind of people that I'm talking about who just walk through life and everything is totally casual to them, and they say completely, they may not be saying anything wrong, but they're not saying anything with any substance either. And most of the time they shouldn't say anything at all.
Right.
Yeah. The next time we're together, it's a big study. I'm not sure how deep we'll get into it, but it has to do with Rabbi Akiva's Mishnah number 18, where it says, he used to say, beloved is man, for he was created in God's image. And he has much more to say on that. So we'll look at a few certain things, and it will be good, and we'll have a good time. Okay? Bezrat Hashem, with God's help. Okay. All right, I'm finished. My voice is deciding to stop, and so I'm also going to stop. So, Shalom Aleichem, or Shalom Uvrakah. I got my greetings mixed up, see? Shalom Uvrakah, peace, because I wasn't thinking. My mouth was running, and here I was not keeping Rabbi Akiva's advice, you see? So, Shalom Uvrakah, peace and a blessing, and that's it. I'm finished.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you Shalom Uvrakah, peace and a blessing.